Going to happen sooner or later, so I guess it might as well be today. And that would be the Sturmey Archer 3-speed hub. That's what's happening on this episode of Featherstone Bicycles. Before we get started on the Sturmey Archer 3-speed hub, I do want to wipe off the wax on the frame and the other painted parts because I want to get this back up on the stand. So if you're familiar with last season, you know I do that so that I don't hit my head on the stand, which is suspended from the ceiling. Start by letting the air out. This tire. I'm getting the tire off. Take out the chain for the shifter. All right, we've got the tire off. We've loosened up all the nipples, and now you think we might be ready to take all the spokes out like we did on the wheels last season, but we have an issue. On the drive side, we have the sprocket engaged here, and it's going to be impossible to get the spokes on this side of the hub out. That's problem number one. Problem number two is that what's holding the gear assembly inside the hub, which you can't see right now, but it's underneath the sprocket, is a ring, a lock ring basically, that's around this big around, and it has 3 slots on it, and you need to use a screwdriver or a punch and a hammer to loosen it counterclockwise to wind it off, and then that will allow you to pull the whole gear assembly out of the hub. The reason that we're going to do that now is that if you took all the spokes out and you just had the hub with the gear assembly in it, because of the fact that there's no leverage, because the gears allow you to pedal backwards, you can't hold, like you couldn't put the axle in a vise and and turn that, because the axle would spin. So you need to leave the spokes in the wheel so that you can hold this to and use it as leverage while you're punching that lock ring backwards. So again, I'm not going to describe the whole disassembly process. There's many videos out there on YouTube that do a really good job of this, including at least 2 from RJ the Bike Guy, which I'll put a description in. But I will tell you that one of the interesting stories about these is that I mentioned last season a friend of mine, Mike, who owns a local bike shop, when he was first at the Schwinn Mechanics School, when he was first getting into business, one of the days there, they had to completely disassemble a Sturmey Archer hub, 3-speed hub, and then clean it and then put it back together. So in the morning, the students took it all apart and cleaned the parts. And one of the most important things about doing this for the first time, if you're going to be doing this, is that as you're disassembling it, put the pieces on the side in the order that they came, because as I said, there's plus or minus about 100 parts in these things, and keep track of the drive side and the non-drive side, because it is not symmetrical. And anyway, so the students had put everything, of course, in order, and cleaned the parts, kept them in order, and then the instructor said it's time for lunch. So they all left for lunch, and while they were gone at lunch, the instructor went around to everyone's table and rearranged all the parts. So when they came back, they had to figure it out on their own, which I guess is probably the best way to learn, because they'll never forget it after that. Anyway, this first part is the pull chain or whatever that's connected to the 3-speed cable. And then this is a nut that puts the holds the axle onto the frame, and this nut has an indicator hole in it. And the reason that hole is there, and again, I'm not going to show this because this will happen in the last video on the reassembly, but I will include a link to a video that RJ the Bike Guy has on how to calibrate a 3-speed hub, and this is where this indicator hole comes into play. As you're calibrating it, you use that hole to see where this part of the this beginning of this solid part, not the chain part, is in relationship to that hole. You use that to see where each position, first, second, or third gear is. got our Sturmey Archer 3-speed hub taken apart, cleaned. Now it's ready to put it back together. See that? It says AW is the model number and 77 is the year. This is a little oil cap. You don't put grease in this. You put grease obviously where the bearings are, and you saw I put grease in there for the bearings. But as far as all the gears internally and everything, you put non-detergent oil in here, and only a little bit. I think it's 1 teaspoon goes in when you construct it. And then you shouldn't have to do anything else, but if it ever is sticking or something like that, there's a little reserve cap here that you open up, and you can drop few drops of that non-detergent oil in there. So we're going to put it back together the same way, reverse of the way that we took it apart. As far as we're going to take it today, I've got the Sturmey Archer hub all taken apart and cleaned and put back together. We're not going to, of course, put the sprocket back on at this point because we still have to clean the spokes and the wheel and get that part all put together, get the hub and the spokes and the wheel put back together before we can put the sprocket back on. So thanks for sticking with me through this episode, and I hope to see you next week on Featherstone Bicycles.